Snow stung my face as I stood shivering on the porch, my breath fogging in the frigid night air. The door I'd called home for 25 years was locked, the windows glowing with cruel indifference. My own parents had thrown me out after trashing my house, their laughter echoing as the deadbolt clicked. It was supposed to be a celebration. My 25th birthday, a milestone I'd anticipated with quiet pride, was meant to be a cozy gathering at my small, lovingly curated home in upstate New York. I'd spent weeks planning, string lights twinkling above the dining table, a playlist of my favorite songs, and a homemade cake I'd baked with care. My parents, Ellen and Richard, had insisted on coming over to help set up. I trusted them. Why wouldn't I? They were family. But when I returned from picking up extra candles, I found chaos. Furniture overturned, dishes shattered, my cherished photo albums torn apart. And there they stood, my mother's smirk sharp as a blade, my father's arms crossed, both radiating smug satisfaction. "You're too soft, Clara," my mother said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is a lesson. You need to grow up." I begged for an explanation, my voice cracking. They'd always been controlling, always critical. But this was betrayal on a level I couldn't comprehend. They didn't answer. Instead, they shoved me outside, locked the door, and left me in the snow without my coat. My phone, wallet, and keys were inside. The neighbors' houses were dark, the streets silent except for the howl of the wind. I pounded on the door, tears freezing on my cheeks. But the only response was their laughter fading into the house. I wasn't just cold, I was hollow. My home, my sanctuary, was violated. My family, the people supposed to love me, had orchestrated this cruelty. But as I stood there, shivering in my thin sweater, something shifted. A spark of defiance flickered in my chest. I wasn't going to let them break me. Not tonight. Not ever. I stumbled to the shed behind the house, my fingers numb as I pried open the rusty door. Inside, I found an old blanket and a flashlight. Wrapping the blanket around my shoulders, I sat on the frozen ground, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark. My mind raced. Why would they do this? I'd always try to please them, to meet their impossible standards. Growing up, I'd tiptoed around their tempers, their demands for perfection. Straight A's. No dating. No frivolous hobbies. I thought buying my own house last year, a modest fixer-upper, would prove I'd made it. But it wasn't enough. Nothing ever was. The answer came to me in fragments, pieced together from years of subtle slights and outright manipulations. They resented my independence, my house, my job as a graphic designer, my quiet confidence seed, all threatened their control. This wasn't just about my birthday. It was about punishing me for daring to live on my own terms. I couldn't stay in the shed forever. The cold was seeping into my bones, and I needed a plan. My best friend, Mia, lived 10 miles away. If I could get to her, I'd have warmth, safety, and a chance to think. But walking in a snowstorm with no phone or money, it felt impossible. Yet the alternative, begging my parents for mercy, wasn't an option. I'd rather freeze than give them that satisfaction. I tucked the flashlight under my arm and started walking, the snow crunching under my sneakers. Each step felt like defiance, a refusal to let their cruelty define me. The road was deserted, the storm swallowing any hope of a passing car. My mind churned with memories, my mother's voice berating me for wasting money on art supplies, my father's silence when I needed his support. They'd always framed their control as love. But tonight, the mask was off. After what felt like hours, headlights pierced the snow. A truck slowed beside me, and an older woman leaned out, her face creased with concern. "You okay, hon?" she asked. I must have looked like a ghost, pale, shivering, wrapped in a tattered blanket. I explained enough to get a ride to Mia's, my voice shaking but resolute. As the truck rumbled forward, I stared out the window, my heart hardening. They wanted to teach me a lesson. Fine. I'd show them I could learn and fight back. At Mia's apartment, I collapsed on her couch. The warmth of her space thawing my body, but not my anger. Mia, fierce and loyal, listened as I recounted the night, her eyes widening with every detail. "They're monsters," she said, handing me a mug of tea. "What are you going to do?" I didn't know yet. But as I sipped the tea, staring at the steam curling upward, I felt the spark in my chest grow into a flame. They'd tried to break me, but they'd only made me stronger. I'd reclaim my home, my life, and my dignity, and I'd make sure they regretted ever crossing me. Mia's apartment was a lifeline, a warm cocoon where I could breathe and think. But even as I sat on her couch, wrapped in a borrowed sweater, my mind was back at my house, me home now a battlefield. The image of my shattered dishes, my torn photos, burned in my mind. I wanted answers. But more than that, I wanted justice. Mia, ever practical, suggested calling the police. "They destroyed your property." "Clara, that's a crime." I hesitated. Reporting my own parents felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But as I replayed the night, their laughter, the locked door, the snow biting my skin, I realized they'd already crossed that line. I nodded, and Mia dialed 911. The officer who arrived was kind but skeptical. "Your parents did this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow as he jotted down my statement. I showed him photos I'd taken on Mia's phone when I'd briefly gone back to document the damage before the snow got worse. The living room looked like a tornado had hit, couch cushions slashed, my books shredded, my grandmother's vase in pieces. The officer's expression softened. "This is serious vandalism. We'll need to talk to them." I gave him their names and my address, my stomach twisting. What would they say? Would they lie? Paint me as the ungrateful daughter? I pushed the thought away. I had evidence. I had Mia. And I had my own resolve, growing stronger by the minute. The police left to question my parents, and Mia turned to me, her eyes blazing. "You need a lawyer. Clara. They can't get away with this." She pulled out her laptop and started searching for local attorneys. I felt a surge of gratitude, for Hershey was my anchor, my co-conspirator. Within an hour, we'd booked a consultation with a lawyer named Sarah Klein, who specialized in property disputes and family law. "Bring everything you have," Sarah said over the phone, her voice calm but firm. "We'll build a case." The next morning, I returned to my house with Mia and the police. My parents were gone, the house eerily quiet. The damage was even worse in daylight. My paintings, which I'd spent years creating, were slashed. My laptop was smashed. Even my childhood teddy bear was gutted. I felt a sob rise in my throat, but I swallowed it. Crying wouldn't fix this. Action would. The police took photos and collected evidence, promising to follow up. As they worked, I found a note taped to the fridge, written in my mother's sharp handwriting. "You'll thank us one day." My blood boiled. Thank them. For destroying my home. For locking me out like an animal. I handed the note to the officer, my hands trembling with rage. Sarah, the lawyer, met us that afternoon. She was in her 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor that put me at ease. After reviewing the photos and my statement, she leaned back in her chair. "This is vandalism, trespassing, and emotional distress. At minimum," she said, "we can file a civil suit for damages and pursue criminal charges. But Clara, I need to know, what do you want out of this?" I thought about it. Money for repairs would help, but it wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they'd done, to understand they couldn't control me anymore. "I want my life back," I said, my voice steady. "And I want them to know they can't do this to anyone else." Sarah nodded. "Then we'll hit them where it hurts, their reputation and their wallets. Your parents are well known in the community, right? Pillars of the church, charity board members." I nodded, my stomach sinking. They'd always hidden their cruelty behind a polished facade. Good, Sarah said, a glint in her eye. That gives us leverage. Over the next few days, we built the case. Mia helped me catalog the damage, estimating repair costs. Sarah filed a restraining order to keep my parents away from my house and me. The police investigation revealed they'd claimed it was a prank gone wrong. But the note and the extent of the damage contradicted their story. They were facing charges of vandalism and trespassing. But I wasn't done. Sarah suggested a bold move: go public. They thrive on their image. She said, expose them, and they'll crumble. I hesitated. Airing family secrets felt terrifying. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. They'd humiliated me. Now it was my turn. Mia connected me with a local journalist, Emma, who was hungry for a human interest story. I told her everything, not just the birthday disaster, but the years of emotional manipulation, the control, the conditional love. Emma listened, her eyes wide, and promised to handle the story with care. This could help others, she said. People need to know they're not alone. As the article took shape, I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. I was taking back my narrative, reclaiming my voice. My parents had tried to silence me, but I was done being their victim. The spark in my chest was now afire, and I was ready to let it burn. The article hit the local newsstands a week later. Its headline stark: family betrayal, daughter locked out after parents destroy her home. My heart pounded as I read it. Emma's words weaving my pain into a story that was both raw and powerful. She'd captured my voice perfectly, detailing the vandalism, the cruelty, and the years of control that led to that night. The community's response was swift and overwhelming. Neighbors I barely knew left voicemails offering support. Friends from high school, people I hadn't spoken to in years, sent messages on social media, horrified but not entirely surprised. My parents' polished image, church leaders, charity organizers cracked under the weight of the truth. I heard whispers of their friends distancing themselves, their charity board quietly asking them to step down. It was exactly what Sarah predicted. Their reputation was their currency, and I devalued it. But they didn't go quietly. My mother called, her voice venomous through Mia's phone, since mine was still broken. "You're a disgrace," she hissed, spreading lies to ruin us. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself, and the restraining order kept her at bay. My father, true to form, stayed silent, letting her fight their battles. It was a pattern I knew too well. Sarah pushed forward with the lawsuit, filing for damages to cover repairs and emotional distress. The estimated cost to fix my house was $15. 000 furniture, electronics, sentimental items like my grandmother's vase. All gone. The emotional toll was harder to quantify. But Sarah was relentless, arguing that their actions were deliberate and malicious. "We'll make them pay," she said, her confidence bolstering mine. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding. Mia and I spent weekends cleaning up the wreckage, salvaging what we could. My neighbors pitched in, one bringing a new coffee table, another offering to repaint the walls. Their kindness reminded me that family isn't always blood, it's the people who show up when you're at your lowest. Each small act of support felt like a brick in the foundation of my new life. But the legal battle was far from over. My parents hired a lawyer, a slick man named Greg, who tried to spin their actions as a misunderstanding. He argued I'd provoked them by being ungrateful, claiming they'd only meant to teach me a lesson. It was infuriating, but Sarah was unfazed. "They're grasping at straws," she said. "The evidence is airtight." The first court hearing was a week away, and I was a bundle of nerves. Mia suggested I see a therapist to process the trauma, and I reluctantly agreed. Dr. Patel, a soft-spoken woman with a knack for asking hard questions, helped me untangle the years of guilt and fear my parents had woven into me. "You're not responsible for their actions," she said during our first session. You're allowed to choose yourself. Those words became my mantra. As the hearing approached, Emma's article gained traction beyond our town. A regional news outlet picked it up, and suddenly, I was getting emails from strangers who'd lived through similar betrayals. One woman wrote about her controlling mother. Another shared how her family had sabotaged her career. Their stories fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about me, Anna Maria, it was about breaking the cycle of toxic family dynamics. The night before the hearing, I sat with Mia, going over my testimony. "You're going to be amazing," she said, squeezing my hand. I wasn't so sure. Facing my parents in court, seeing their faces, felt like walking into a lion's den. But I thought of the snow, the locked door, the note on the fridge. I thought of the spark in my chest, now a steady flame. I was ready. The courtroom was small but packed, the air thick with tension. My parents sat across from me. My mother's eyes narrowed, my father staring at the floor. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, called the session to order. Sarah presented our case, laying out the evidence, photos, the police report, the note, even testimony from the truck driver who'd found me in the snow. Greg tried to counter, but his arguments felt flimsy, his client's smugness undermining his words. When it was my turn to speak, my voice trembled at first. I told the judge about my birthday, the betrayal, the cold. I spoke of the years I'd spent trying to earn their love, only to realize it was never mine to earn. They wanted to control me, I said, looking directly at them. But I'm done being their pawn. The judge's expression was unreadable, but I felt lighter. I'd said my truth, and no one could take that away. As I stepped down, Mia gave me a proud nod, and Sarah whispered, "You nailed it." The hearing adjourned for the judge to review the evidence, and I walked out feeling like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. But the fight wasn't over. My parents were planning something, I could feel it, and I needed to be ready for whatever came next. The courtroom's echo lingered in my mind as I drove back to Mia's, the weight of my testimony both freeing and heavy. I'd faced my parents, spoken my truth, but their defiant glares told me they weren't done fighting. I needed to prepare, not just for the judge's ruling, but for whatever retaliation they were brewing. Sarah called the next morning with news. The judge had granted a temporary order for my parents to cover immediate repair costs while the case proceeded. It was a small victory, but it meant I could start fixing my house. "They're rattled," Sarah said. "Their lawyers scrambling, and the community backlash is hitting them hard." I felt a grim satisfaction. Their perfect facade was crumbling, and I was the one wielding the hammer. With the funds, I hired a contractor to repair the worst of the damage, the broken windows, the slashed furniture, the ruined floors. Each day, my house looked more like home again, but the emotional scars were harder to mend. Dr. Patel helped me navigate the anger and grief, urging me to focus on what I could control. "You're building a new life," she said. "Let that be your revenge." Mia, ever my rock, suggested a fundraiser to replace my art supplies and laptop. "Your community wants to help," she said. We set up an online campaign, and to my shock, donations poured in, not just from neighbors, but from strangers moved by Emma's article. One donor, an artist named Lena, sent me a set of brushes with a note: "Keep creating. They can't take your talent." I cried reading it, not out of sadness, but gratitude. I wasn't alone, but my parents weren't idle. A week after the hearing, I got a call from Emma. "They're trying to spin the story," she warned. My mother had given an interview to a rival paper, claiming I'd exaggerated, that I'd always been dramatic. She painted herself as a loving mother pushed to extremes by an ungrateful child. My father, predictably, backed her up with vague platitudes about family misunderstandings. It was a lie so blatant it hurt, but it was also a sign of their desperation. Sarah was furious. "They're trying to sway public opinion," she said. "We need to double down." She suggested I write an op-ed, A direct response to their lies. I hesitated. Going public again felt like exposing a raw wound, but Dr. Patel's words echoed, "Choose yourself." So I sat down with Mia and wrote, pouring out the truth of my childhood. The control. The conditional love. I didn't hold back. They didn't just trash my house. I wrote. They tried to trash my spirit. But I'm still standing. The op-ed ran in the same paper as Emma's article, and the response was electric. Messages flooded my inbox. Support. Shared stories. Even apologies from people who'd once admired my parents. Their church held a meeting, and rumors swirled that they'd been asked to leave the congregation. I didn't celebrate, but I felt a quiet justice. They'd built their lives on appearances, and now those appearances were dust. The legal battle intensified. Sarah uncovered financial records showing my parents had used money from a family trust meant for me to fund their lavish lifestyle. It was a bombshell. "This strengthens our case," Sarah said. "We can argue they've been defrauding you for years." The trust, set up by my grandmother, was supposed to support my education and future. Instead, they drained it for vacations and status symbols. The betrayal cut deeper than the trashed house. I decided to confront them. Not in person. Sarah warned against violating the restraining order, but through a letter. I wrote it in one sitting, my hand shaking as I detailed every hurt, every manipulation, every moment they'd made me feel small. "You thought you could break me," I ended, "but you only taught me how strong I am." I mailed it, knowing they'd read it, knowing it would burn. The second hearing was tougher. Their lawyer, Greg, brought witnesses, old family friends who claimed my parents were misunderstood. But Sarah was relentless, cross-examining them until their stories unraveled. One admitted my mother had a temper. Another couldn't explain why they'd never checked on me after the incident. The judge's face was stern, her questions sharp. I could feel the tide turning. That night, Mia threw a small gathering at her place to celebrate the progress. Neighbors and new friends came, bringing food and laughter. Lena, the artist, showed up with a sketchbook, and we spent hours drawing together, my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. I was rebuilding not just my house, but my community, my purpose. Yet I knew my parents wouldn't surrender easily. Emma called with a tip. They were planning to sell their house and leave town, likely to escape the fallout. Part of me wanted them gone, but another part demanded accountability. They couldn't just run. Not this time. As I lay awake that night, the flame in my chest burned brighter. I was no longer the scared girl in the snow. I was Clara, and I was fighting for my life. Whatever they threw at me next, I'd be ready. The news of my parents' plan to flee hit like a punch, but it also clarified my resolve. They thought they could escape the consequences, slip away to some new town where their lies would hold. I wasn't going to let that happen. With Sarah's guidance, we filed an emergency motion to freeze their assets, citing the misused trust funds. The judge approved it, and suddenly, their escape plan was stalled. Sarah was a force, her calm precision cutting through their defenses. "They're cornered," she told me over coffee. "The trust fund evidence is damning, and their credibility is shot. But cornered animals are dangerous," and I braced for their next move. Sure enough, my mother started a smear campaign online, posting on social media about how I'd torn the family apart. She shared old photos of us smiling, captioning them with crocodile tears about her lost daughter. It was manipulation dressed as grief, and it stung more than I expected. Mia urged me to respond, but Dr. Patel advised restraint. "Don't play their game," she said. "Focus on your healing, your truth." So I did. I poured my energy into my art, sketching late into the night, turning my pain into vibrant colors and bold lines. Lena, the artist who donated brushes, invited me to a local gallery event, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of joy. My work was rough, raw, but it was mine, and people noticed. A gallery owner even asked if I'd consider exhibiting. It was a small light in the darkness, but I clung to it. The community's support grew stronger. The fundraiser hit its goal, and I replaced my laptop and art supplies, setting up a new studio in my slowly healing home. Neighbors dropped by with meals, tools, even plants to brighten the space. Each gesture reminded me I was building a new family, one rooted in kindness, not control. But the legal fight loomed large. The final hearing was set, and Sarah warned it would be brutal. "They're desperate," she said. "They'll throw everything they have at us." She was right. At the hearing, Greg unveiled a new tactic: character witnesses who painted me as unstable, claiming I'd always been troubled. One was a former teacher who barely knew me. Another was a distant cousin who'd always envied my independence. Their lies were flimsy, but they hurt, chipping away at the confidence I'd built. Sarah dismantled them with precision, presenting my therapist's testimony about my resilience and the police report's clear evidence. The judge listened, her face unreadable, but I caught a flicker of sympathy when I spoke. This time, I didn't just recount the night of my birthday. I told the court about the trust fund, how my grandmother's legacy meant to give me a future was stolen. I spoke of the years I'd spent shrinking myself to fit their mold, only to realize they'd never love me for who I was. "I'm not asking for revenge," I said, my voice steady. "I'm asking for justice for me, and for anyone else they've hurt." The judge adjourned to deliberate, leaving us in tense limbo. That night, I got a call from Emma. She'd dug deeper and found something explosive. My parents had a history of financial misconduct, including unreported income from their charity work. It wasn't just me they'd betrayed. They'd been fleecing their community for years. Emma was preparing a follow-up article, but she needed my approval to run it. "This could ruin them," she said, "but it could also protect others." I didn't hesitate. "Run it." The article dropped the next day, and the fallout was immediate. Their remaining allies abandoned them, and the charity board launched an investigation. My parents' world was imploding, and while part of me felt a pang of guilt, years of conditioning Die Hardy knew this was their doing, not mine. The judge's ruling came a week later. My parents were ordered to pay $20,000 in damages, covering repairs and emotional distress, and to return the misused trust funds with interest. The criminal charges vandalism and trespassing resulted in community service and probation. It wasn't jail, but it was accountability. The restraining order was made permanent. I walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried my whole life. But the victory was bittersweet. My parents sent a letter through their lawyer, not apologizing, but blaming me for destroying the family. I didn't respond. Instead, I framed the court order and hung it in my studio, a reminder of my strength. I was done seeking their approval. I had my home, my art, my community. I had myself. As winter turned to spring, I focused on healing. I started therapy twice a week, unpacking the layers of trauma with Dr. Patel. I painted, my work growing bolder, more confident. Lena and I planned a joint exhibit, a celebration of resilience through art. The flame in my chest was now a steady glow, guiding me toward a future I was building, brick by brick. But I knew this wasn't the end. My parents were down, but not out, and I needed to stay vigilant, ready for whatever came next. Spring brought new life to my home, with fresh paint on the walls and flowers blooming in the yard. But the scars of that winter night lingered. The court's ruling had given me justice, but my parents' silence felt like a storm brewing. I knew them too well. They'd never accept defeat. Still, I focused on what I could control: my art, my healing, and the community that had become my family. The gallery exhibit with Lena was a turning point. We titled it Unbroken, a nod to our shared stories of overcoming pain. My paintings, vivid, raw depictions of betrayal and resilience, drew a crowd. Strangers approached me, their eyes soft with understanding. sharing their own stories of toxic families. One woman, tearful, hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for being brave." It was more than validation. It was purpose. My pain had become a beacon for others. Mia threw a celebration afterward, filling my house with laughter and music. My neighbors, Lena, even Sarah and Emma came, toasting to my strength. For the first time since my birthday, my home felt like mine again, not just a structure, but a sanctuary. I stood in the doorway, watching the warmth spill out, and felt the flame in my chest burn steady. I'd rebuilt more than walls. I'd rebuilt myself. But the peace was short-lived. A week later, Sarah called with a warning. My parents had filed an appeal, claiming the damages were excessive and the trust fund evidence misinterpreted. It was a desperate move, but it meant more legal battles. "They're running out of options," Sarah said. "This is their last stand." I wasn't surprised, but I was tired. How much more would I have to fight to be free? Dr. Patel helped me navigate the anger. "You're not fighting them anymore," she said. "You're fighting for your peace." She suggested I write a letter to myself, a promise to let go of their hold. I sat in my studio, pen in hand, and wrote, "Clara, you are enough. You are not their mistakes. You are your own light." I taped it to my mirror, reading it daily like a prayer. Emma's second article had done its work. The charity board's investigation confirmed my parents' financial misconduct, and they were formally removed. The community shunned them, their social standing in tatters. I heard through a neighbor that they'd put their house back on the market, this time at a loss. Part of me pitted them they'd built their lives on lies, and now those lies had collapsed. But pity didn't mean forgiveness. Not yet. Sarah prepared for the appeal, digging deeper into the trust fund records. She found more. My parents had forged my signature on documents to access the funds years ago. It was fraud, plain and simple, and Sarah was ready to escalate the case. "We can push for criminal charges," she said, "but it's your call." I thought about it, weighing the cost of more fighting against the need for closure. I chose to pursue it. They'd stolen more than money. They'd stolen my trust, my security. They needed to face the full consequences. The appeal hearing was less dramatic, but no less tense. Greg, their lawyer, argued passionately, but his case was weak, built on deflections and half-truths. Sarah presented the new evidence, her voice cutting through his bluster. The judge, the same stern woman from before, dismissed the appeal in under an hour. "The evidence is overwhelming," she said. The defendant's actions were deliberate and egregious. She upheld the damages and added penalties for the trust fund fraud, ordering an additional $10,000 in restitution. I walked out of the courtroom, Mia's arm around me, feeling a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. I'd won, but at what cost? My parents were shadows of their former selves, their lives unraveling. I didn't want to be like them, consumed by resentment. I wanted to move forward. That night, I hosted a small dinner in my now-restored home. Lena brought sketches, Mia brought wine, and we talked until midnight, dreaming of the future. I told them about a new project, a community art program for kids from tough homes, a way to give them the support I'd craved growing up. They loved it, and we brainstormed names, laughing over terrible puns. It felt like planting a seed, a way to turn my pain into something beautiful. But late that night, alone in my studio, I got a text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this." It read, no name, but I knew it was my mother. My heart raced, but I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded it to Sarah and saved it as evidence. They were still trying to intimidate me, but I wasn't that scared girl in the snow anymore. I was ready for whatever they threw next, and I'd face it with the strength I'd earned. The threatening text from my mother was a spark in dry grass, reigniting my vigilance. Sarah filed it as evidence of harassment, strengthening the case for criminal fraud charges. "They're digging their own grave," she said, her voice steady but fierce. I trusted her, but the message lingered, a reminder that my parents' cruelty wasn't done with me yet. Still, I refused to let it dim the life I was building. My art program idea took root. With Lena's help, I secured a small grant from a local arts council, enough to rent a community center space and buy supplies. We called it Canvas of Courage, a place for kids to express themselves through art, to find safety in creativity. The first class had 10 kids, their eyes bright with curiosity despite their own scars. One girl, shy and 12, painted a storm that looked like my own heart months ago. "It's okay to be mad," I told her, kneeling beside her. "Use it to make something beautiful." Her small smile felt like a victory. The community rallied around the program. Neighbors volunteered. Emma wrote a feature. And even the gallery owner who'd shown my work donated easels. Each step forward felt like a brick in the wall between me and my parents' shadow. But the legal battle wasn't over. Sarah pushed for the fraud charges, and the district attorney agreed to investigate. My parents were served with new papers, and I heard through Emma that they were unraveling me, mother lashing out, my father retreating further into silence. The fraud case moved faster than I expected. Evidence of forged signatures and misappropriated funds was undeniable, and their lawyer, Greg, couldn't spin it away. In a pre-trial meeting, they offered a plea, guilty to lesser charges in exchange for no jail time. I consulted Sarah and Dr. Patel, torn between wanting them punished and wanting closure. "What do you need to move on?" Dr. Patel asked. I realized I didn't need them in prison, I needed them to stop hurting me. I agreed to the plea, but only if they wrote a public apology, published in the local paper. They resisted, but the DA's pressure was too much. The apology ran a month later. A stiff, reluctant admission of mistakes in handling the trust fund and regret for the birthday incident. It wasn't heartfelt, but it was public. Another crack in their facade. The judge sentenced them to 3 years probation and community service, plus full restitution of the trust fund, now totaling $50,000 with interest. It was enough to secure my future, maybe even expand the art program. With the legal battles finally over, I focused on living. My house was fully restored, each room a testament to my resilience. I hung my paintings, Lena's sketches, and photos of my new community-chosen family. Mia and I planned a trip to celebrate my 26th birthday, a quiet beach getaway far from snow and betrayal. "No one's locking you out this time," she teased, and I laughed, the sound freer than it had been in years. But the final piece of my healing came unexpectedly. One evening, a letter arrived not from my parents, but from my father's sister, Aunt June, who I hadn't seen in years. She'd read Emma's articles and wanted to reconnect. I didn't know how bad it was. She wrote, "I'm so sorry I wasn't there." We met for coffee, and her tears matched mine as she shared her own struggles with my parents' control. She became a new ally, a link to family that didn't hurt. As summer bloomed, so did Canvas of Courage. We expanded to 2 classes a week, and I started mentoring a few kids, including the shy girl, who now signed her paintings with pride. My own art flourished, earning a solo exhibit at the gallery. At the opening, surrounded by friends, neighbors, and those kids' beaming faces, I felt whole. The flame in my chest was no longer anger, it was purpose, love, resilience. I never heard from my parents again. The restraining order held, and they moved to a new town, their reputation in ruins. I didn't wish them ill, just wished them gone. And they were. I'd fought for my life and won, not by destroying them, but by building something better. My home, my art, my community, they were my victory. Standing in my studio, a new canvas before me, I picked up a brush. The first stroke was bold, vibrant, alive. It was mine, and no one could take it away. Not ever again.